I still remember standing on the stage in school as a teenager, reciting a poem, my hands shaking with nervousness, my voice trembling with fear, and my heart pounding so hard I thought that others could hear it. There were hundreds of students and teachers in front of me. I was on the stage and no one was listening to me. My voice was quite feeble. I was stuttering. I was forgetting my lines. And I could actually see the crowd getting bored, disengaged, and some of them, yeah, even mocking me. So I had stage fright, and this was perhaps one of the most embarrassing moments of my life as a teenager. And as a child and all through my teenage years, I remember being this shy, underconfident boy who was constantly living under this inferiority complex. And the strongest voice in my head was, I'm not good enough. And this self-belief of mine, this low self-belief of mine really became my biggest enemy and defeated me many times in life. Until this one moment when one person changed my life. It was during my first job about 20 years back. I was still scared of, petrified of public speaking, really, still comparing myself with others and still feeling inadequate. The enemy, I'm not good enough, becoming bigger and tightening its grip around me. And there was a job posting for a trainer's position that came up. This is about 21 years back. So this job position for a trainer came up, and many of my friends and my colleagues applied, but I did not. Because I saw them apply, and after I saw them apply, I was like, ये लोग apply कर रहे हैं तो मैं क्या करूँगा यार? Because amongst them was my friend Deba, who played the guitar and sang confidently, right? There was Samit, who had a great sense of humor. There was Anirudh, who spoke brilliant English. And out of fear of embarrassment and failure, I decided that I'm not going to apply, right? Why apply when I know I'm going to fail, right? And then late one evening, I was sitting in an auto with my then girlfriend, now wife, Sandra, who had this conversation with me. And she asked me why I didn't apply. And for the first time ever, I shared with her my feelings, my fears, my overpowering enemy that I'm not good enough. There are others who are better than me at this. I remember having this chat with Sandra in the auto. I don't remember exactly what she said. She said a lot, but she kicked me in my backside. But one of the messages was really about the fact that you have no idea how good you are. You're as good as anybody else and better than many others. Without getting into the details of the conversation, it was that moment where she believed in me when I did not believe in myself. And she saw in me what I could not see in myself. And she became the catalyst in encouraging me to do something about it. And she actually did put in my application. And out of the 45 odd people who applied 20 years back, I became the trainer. I got selected and I became the trainer. And that's the day my adventure really started 20 years back. And I decided somewhere along this journey, I decided that, so what if I'm not born with it? Because I knew that there's some people who are born with it. So I said, so what if I'm not born with it? I will compensate for my not being born with it by doing research and understanding the science behind how is it that somebody becomes a good speaker? How is it that somebody becomes a good influencer, a great storyteller? I wanted to understand the science behind that. And that's the path that I decided to get on about 20 years back. And it's really on this journey, this adventure, that it took me to some beautiful, beautiful places. It got me invited to the TEDx stage twice. It got me to speak at some amazing forums, including the World Storytelling Congress. Got me to open my own leadership development company about 10 years back in India and then expanded to Australia now. Got me to become a storytelling coach and got me even to this opportunity of engaging with all of you at EY, talking about storytelling, talking about how it can help you influence and inspire people. So today, when I coach leaders, when I work with managers across organizations, across the globe, whether they are skilled natural speakers or whether they've had a journey like mine, I now know that the process and the science works each and every time. Because it's something I've tried on myself, it's something I've worked with at least about 5,000 people across more than 120 organizations, helping them transform to become the kind of communicators and storytellers that they really wanted to be. So the process works each time and every time, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity today to share bits of that process with all of you. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me and why I do what I do and why I'm so excited to be here. Now we're going to be using the chat window as the primary mode for you telling me what's going on and what your thoughts, your opinions are. So the first thing that I have to ask you, and please be ready on your chat windows, please, please, please. I get energy when I see something coming up there. Otherwise, just looking at myself and the slide deck does not give me energy. I know all of you have been there. So help me keep my energy up. So be ready on the chat window, because my first question to you is really this. As I shared my experience, as I shared my story, my journey with you, my question to you is, how did you feel listening to my story over the last 3 odd minutes? I'd love to get a few sound bites in the chat window. How did you feel? What happened to you? What did you go through when you listened to my story over the last 3 odd minutes? Okay, Prabhakar said, I could see myself. That's beautiful, Prabhakar. That's beautiful. Dinesh says, related to it. Thank you so much, Dinesh. Resonate, Sai Prasad said. Could connect to it, Amit says. Mamta says, same with me. I still feel so. Trying to portray it like a movie. Yeah, I feel I'm going in an auto myself. Okay. The weather should be right for it. Then you enjoy the auto rickshaw rides. Yeah. It's reminding us of our stories, right? That's Rama says that. Manish says self-belief is the key. Some smiles coming from. I'm not. Oh, okay. Somebody's not getting the audio. We'll try and help you if we can. Related to my first technical presentation, okay, in college, started going back in my time. I'm in the same situation. Always believe in yourself. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for sharing all of this in the chat window. And as I read through these comments, I think what's apparent is that what I hear from people say is what I'm hearing you say also, because very often when I share a story like this, the kind of responses I get on the screen for you, people say they were able to relate, they were able to connect, they were able to empathize, they were able to engage with it, right? Some of you said in the chat window here that you could relate to the story, right? It's reminded, GVS Ramachandran said that I could, it reminds us of our story. Now, here's my question. I'm hearing the word connect. I'm hearing the word, as we listen to your story, it made us think of our story, right? That happened for many of you. Here's the question. What do you think that does to our relationship, your relationship with me? When, as you listen to my story, you can connect to the story, you can relate to the story, and my story is making you think of your story. What does that do to our relationship? Can you put down in the chat window what you think that's doing to our relationship? Come on, let's see what you have there. What do you think it's doing to our relationship? This connecting, this relating, this thinking of your own stories. It builds trust. Absolutely. Preeti says builds trust. Devapriya, bonding, the connect, right? And the bottom line really is that it builds a level of trust, alignment needed, says great words, right? Now consider this. Now knowing this about me and having gone through that process would make it a little bit more easier for you to perhaps work with me. Yes? Not just work with me. If I had to now work with you, if I had to now influence you to do something, there is a higher chance that you would listen to me. I'm not saying whether you'd agree with me or not, but there's a higher possibility that you'd listen to me closely because of that trust that's gotten built in. Now, as you think of yourself as leaders, imagine what it could do to your ability to inspire people. Imagine what it could do to your ability to influence stakeholders if you're able to connect with them, relate with them, connect with them at this level, and then make the influence attempt, then make the attempt to try to inspire somebody. That's really the power of storytelling. And somebody's just said, Raghav has just spoken about visualization. Here's a question for you. If you remember the story, the question for you is, how many of you saw the story, saw at least one scene in the story? Just give me a yes if you saw the story. Just type a yes if you saw the story. Type a yes in the chat window if you saw any part of the story. Okay. And now also type, I'm seeing a lot of yeses coming in, great. Type the scene that you saw. Just one word would do. Auto rickshaw, stage, winter, whatever came to you. Just type that word that came. Okay, auto. Sai says auto came. What else came to you? What did you visualize? Going to the stage, the auto rickshaw, the stage, the stage, the stage. You see? Now, with that, I want to introduce you to the most important aspect of storytelling, business narratives. The most important aspect is the visual aspect that we've spoken about, because storytelling is a visual process. Storytelling is a visual process. We've got to, like somebody says, was seeing a movie, we've got to take people through a journey which they can see. And which brings me to the first golden rule of storytelling that I want to introduce to you today. Get your cameras out if you want to take a picture of this slide. The first golden rule of storytelling is right there for you. A good story has to be seen and experienced by the listener, not just heard or read. A good story has got to be seen and experienced, not just heard or read. Seen and experienced. What does that mean? A story has got to be a visual process. It's got to be a visual experience. An experience, it's got to be an emotional experience. It's got to invoke some emotion in the listener. Excitement, happiness, sadness, fear, curiosity. It has to invoke some emotion by taking them through a visual process. So whether you're presenting a boring QBR, MBR deck to a stakeholder, or whether you're making a pitch to a client, or whether you're speaking at a town hall to hundreds of your employees and your team members and talking about something very transactional, you too can use stories to make it really, really inspiring, to make it visual, to create an emotion around it. And we're going to talk about how we do that in this workshop, right? Now, the first thing that I want to share with you is that after you understood the golden rule of storytelling, a good story has to be seen and experienced. I want to tell you how important stories have been and why is it that some of us struggle with storytelling today. Because I saw somebody putting down there that I'm okay with public speaking, but with storytelling is where I struggle and all. And you're not alone. We're all in the same boat, right? And we need to understand why that's happening. But first, let's take a look at what storytelling is and what storytelling is not. So first of all, let's talk about what storytelling is not in the corporate context. So this storytelling is not about kahani sunana, right? This is not about the pub talk stories. You understand the pub talk stories, right? Stories told without an intent, just stories told because you want to tell a story, right? I recently put up a video on LinkedIn because I was in a conversation with a client and it was such a deep, beautiful conversation that I put up a video on LinkedIn. The client told me yeah, storytelling is fun, but everybody's a storyteller. Everybody tells stories. Storytelling is not difficult. And I said, absolutely, yes, storytelling is not difficult at all. But here's the thing. And I told him, I said, my wife gifted me a flying lesson. So I've always wanted to fly a plane. My father was in the Air Force. So on my 40th birthday, a few years back, my wife gifted me a flying lesson here in Australia. And I was pretty excited. And we went up to the airfield and I sat, the pilot did the pre-takeoff test or whatever that's called. We sat in the plane. He took off the plane, the pilot, I'm sitting with him. And suddenly we reach up in the sky and he's flying the plane and he gives me the yoke, the control stick. And he says, okay, fly. Left for left, right for right, front for down, up for up. So I said, okay, can't be that simple, but we did that. So he said, okay, do this, bank left, bank right, front. And within a few seconds, I was actually flying the plane. And it was moving. I was turning left, it would turn left. I was turning right, it would turn right. I was like, my God, this is not rocket science. This is fun. After a few minutes, he took the controls back. He landed the plane. He landed the plane, obviously. And as we got off the plane and we were walking towards the hangar, I looked at him quite cheekily and I asked him, quite cheekily I asked him, I said, so how long will it take me to learn how to fly a plane? How long will it take me how to learn to fly a plane? He looked at me and said that it's going to take you as long as it takes anybody else. But let me tell you this, it's going to take you at least 5 times more to learn how to land a plane than it would take you to learn how to fly a plane. And that made so much sense. Because storytelling is just like that. Anybody can tell a story in the air. But if you're not able to land the story right at the key message, what's the point of storytelling? So business storytelling is not about faffing it out. It's not about telling a story just for the sake of it, but it's about being able to land at the key message that you want to address, that you want to get at. Business storytelling is not absence of data. It is in conjugation with data. Business storytelling is not about giving justification, giving examples, making it unreal. Storytelling is absolutely real. Yeah, so that's what storytelling is, because if you look at it, stories have been around for time immemorial. In this book by Harari, Sapiens, if anybody's read that book, pop a yes there. If you read the book called Sapiens by Harari, brilliant, one of my favorite books from the last 6-7 years that I read. Great book, and even in his book, he talks about how storytelling is even older than language, and cave paintings are testament to that, right? So cave paintings with stories, to the time that where we've all of us attending this session have grown up listening to stories from our parents and grandparents. And those stories have formed our initial belief system, have they not? Right? About friendship, about values, about integrity, about honesty. It's come from stories. To the time when somebody stood up and said those magical words, I have a dream. Let's see in the chat window if you can tell me who I'm talking about. The words, I have a dream, one of the most powerful narratives ever told. Absolutely, Martin Luther King, absolutely. To the time when more recently somebody, late Steve Jobs, went up and told the story of how he wanted to create a dent in the universe. Stories have been instrumental in shaping individual brands, organizational brands, create movements, drive inspiration, make change happen. Stories have really done that in the past, right? And they continue to do that even today. But here's the thing. I'm convinced that we're all born storytellers. We're all born storytellers who've just become shy or unsure of telling stories. Because sometimes when I'm coaching somebody and, in the middle of the session, I'm coaching this person and he goes, all of this is fine, Gatik, but I'm not a storyteller. And whenever I hear that, I look at that client and I say, you're not a storyteller. Okay, I hear you. Did you ever go to school? And they say, yeah, of course I went to school. I said, do you remember getting a report card from school? They say, yeah, I remember getting a report card from school. I said, do you remember taking it back home and having a conversation with your parents? I said, yeah. I said, see, you're a born storyteller. Right? But the point I'm making, that's just in jest, but the point I'm making is that we're all born storytellers who've just become shy or unsure of telling stories, right? And I equate storytelling with dancing. For me, storytelling is just like dancing. All right, here's a question for you. How many of you like to dance? Give me a yes if you like to dance. Give me a yes in the chat window. And give me a couple of exclamation marks if you really love to dance. The number of exclamation marks would tell me how much you really like dancing. Okay, Amrita's got like 10. Oh, wow. Deepika's got a lot of, I like dancing. Malik, yeah, okay. You like dancing. Great. Mayank's just got exclamation marks. Can't get enough. Yeah, Anita, absolutely. So you love dancing, right? Here's the next question, all right? How many of you like dancing without alcohol? Some of the yeses may change. But that's all right. I'm just pulling a fast one. That's all right. Whether you like to have a drink or not is not the point. But here's the point. We all love to dance, but there comes a time where we start becoming a little unsure because storytelling is just like dancing. Storytelling is just like dancing. And like in dancing, and so in storytelling, we go through 5 stages. We go through 5 stages of dancing and 5 stages of storytelling. I equate storytelling with dancing. For me, storytelling is just like dancing. All right, here's a question for you. How many of you like to dance? Give me a yes if you like to dance. Give me a yes in the chat window. And give me a couple of exclamation marks if you really love to dance. The number of exclamation marks would tell me how much you really like dancing. Okay, Amrita's got like 10. Oh, wow. Deepika's got a lot of, I like dancing. Malik, yeah, okay. You like dancing. Great. Mayank's just got exclamation marks. Can't get enough. Yeah, Anita, absolutely. So you love dancing, right? Here's the next question, all right? How many of you like dancing without alcohol? Some of the yeses may change, but that's all right. I'm just pulling a fast one. That's all right. Whether you like to have a drink or not is not the point. But here's the point. We all love to dance, but there comes a time where we start becoming a little unsure because storytelling is just like dancing. Storytelling is just like dancing. And like in dancing, and so in storytelling, we go through 5 stages. We go through 5 stages of dancing and 5 stages of storytelling. And let me show you the first stage right there. The first stage is the child state. Now look at these kids. Look at this picture. Look at these kids. They don't have any clothes on. They've got their underpants on. They don't care who's watching. Just look at the glee. Just look at the joy on their faces. Just see that expression. Tummy is sticking out, underpants, really happy and enjoying their dance. And that's how kids dance. That's how kids tell stories. They dance like no one is watching. That's the first level. Dancing like no one is watching. All of us have been there. All of us have been there. Telling stories Whether people believe it or not doesn't make a difference. My daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, it's 9 now, 8-year-old daughter, when she used to come back from school last year, she'd come back and tell me about the unicorns that she would feed in schools. She would tell me the entire story. Whether I believed in it or not doesn't matter. If she has a story to tell me, she will tell me a story. Dancing like no one is watching. And then this child moves to the next level of becoming the awkward teen. And this is where my elder daughter, Keisha, is. She's 15 now. From dancing like no one is watching, we move to dancing like everyone is watching. Extremely self-conscious. How many of you remember that stage of us as teenagers when it came to dancing and therefore communicating as well? Because that's the link I'm drawing, right? So dancing like everyone is watching. And then we eventually come to this confidence stage. And before I go to the confidence stage, it's so interesting to see this difference between a child and an awkward teen. And it's so relevant to our storytelling as well. Both my daughters, they have very different ways of communicating. But their ways of communicating were quite similar. My younger daughter comes back from school, kicks her shoes, comes back, runs to me and says, Papa, pata aaj school mein kya hua, ye hua, and then Daisy kicked me, and then Mrs. Moses said this, and I did this, and this happened, and that happened. She'll go on and go on and go on. My elder daughter comes in. I ask her, so how was school? She looks at me and she says, fine. I said, what happened? Nothing. Now, this is a concerned parent of a teenager trying to strike a conversation, right? So I said, okay, no problem. So what would you like to have for dinner tonight, sweetheart? And she looks at me and goes, whatever, right? Monosyllable responses, right? And it's interesting, when the two of them, we went to a restaurant recently, and about a year back actually, and this restaurant was playing some music. It wasn't a dancing place, just a regular restaurant with booths, and they were playing some music. And my younger one, 8, elder one, that time she was 14. And suddenly the restaurant started playing the song Despacito. How many of you have heard Despacito? Give me a yes. You heard that song? Despacito. No. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Okay, great. So you know the song, right? Great. So the guy started playing Despacito, and my younger daughter, God bless her, thank God she doesn't know the lyrics, but she loves that song, and the song started playing, and in the middle of the restaurant, she stands up from the booth, stands in the middle of the restaurant. You know, there are booths, and in the middle there's this place to walk where the waiters move around, the servers. Kyra stands up and she starts dancing. You know, and she's dancing, she's having a good time, she's enjoying herself, and suddenly I see my elder daughter sitting there with us, going, Kyra, come back, what are you doing? Kyra, come back. And I look at Keisha and I say, Keisha, what's wrong? What's the problem? She says she's dancing. I said, I can see that. What's your problem? She said, but everyone is watching. I said, okay. And she said, it's embarrassing. I said, it's clearly not embarrassing for her. Why is it embarrassing you? Everyone is watching, right? Dancing like everyone is watching. The self-consciousness stops us from doing the most amazing things in life. And then, as a teenager, from an awkward teen, we become a confident teen, the third stage. Very short-lived stage where we start, instead of dancing like everyone is watching, now because we've mastered a few moves, we move to dancing because everyone is watching. Because now at least there are 2-3 songs on which I can dance and I want to show off, right? So I grew up in the cantonment area, and we had a lot of parties, a lot of 4G parties happening. And for me, this moment, this confident teen moment, very short-lived moment in dancing came when the song Macarena came. Now, the song Macarena is the most process-oriented dance. You can create an Excel sheet on it, right? You can run macros on it also, right? 1 to the 11 steps, right? You can't go wrong. It's the easiest thing to do, right? How many of you remember Macarena? Give me a yes if you remember Macarena. I just want to check whether we're talking the same language. All right, great. You know it, right? And whenever that song would play, I would go there because I wanted to show off one thing that I knew, right? Short-lived stage. But then, after the confident teen stage, a very unfortunate event happens in our life. An extremely unfortunate event. And that unfortunate event is that we become adults. We become adults and we join our first company. 13 steps, Rohit says. Okay, maybe not 11, Rohit. I'll give you that, right? Don't test me on my Macarena dance right now. I'll fail terribly. But the unfortunate thing that happens is that we become adults. And if you remember your first job, the first day, the first week, you go through an induction program, whichever company you would have joined. And you literally, somebody puts the Varmal on you, the, what do you call it? With your iCard, the thing that defines us, right? We get that identity, right? The lanyard. And as we get that, as we wear that, we literally take an oath in our heads. From today, I'm going to be a professional. From today, I'm going to do the things right. From today, I'm going to focus on my goals, on my ambition, and all the right things. But our definition of being a professional is a little warped sometimes. And we decide to become really, really straitjacketed. And we go back to dancing like everyone is watching. Overly self-conscious about the way we express. And God forbid if any one of you actually tried storytelling in a presentation a few years back, and one of the senior leaders who was sitting through your presentation looked at you and said, hey, don't tell me the story yet. Come on, move on. You were like, oh my God, stories are bad. Never tell stories, right? So we become adults, dancing like everyone is watching, going back to the awkward teen stage. And then finally, as we grow older, we go back to the childlike state of not caring and dancing like no one is watching. Why do you think some of the best dancers are really old people and kids, especially at weddings, right? And also think about it, some of the best storytellers are kids and old people, because if they've got a story to tell you, they will tell you that story. So I don't know where you are in dancing, but the question really is, where are you in storytelling? And because a lot of storytelling, a lot of our ability to tell stories in the boardroom, in a virtual setup, to hundreds of people, in a coaching conversation, with a client when you're making a pitch, your ability to tell a story is directly proportionate to what you think about storytelling. Is about what you think about dancing in a restaurant. That's what it equates to. And therefore, I often say that the stories we tell ourselves often stop us from telling the stories we must. I can't tell you about the number of situations, number of times where I've been in a coaching conversation with a client and we've come up with a narrative for a business pitch or for an investor deck. We've come up with a great narrative. I can't tell you the number of times the client has looked at me and said, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. I can't start with a personal story. With my board of directors, you've got to be kidding me. I really can't. It's not going to work. I can't tell you the number of times they've said it and the number of times they've actually done it and it's worked. But the point is, when they say that, it's not going to work, my only question to them is, I ask them, how do you know? Have you done this? They say, no, I just know. I say, how do you know? Are you Nostradamus? Even he ended up making quite a few mistakes, right? Apparently what we're going through now should have happened a couple of years earlier. But the point I'm making is that we've got to give it a shot. Storytelling is about experimenting. Storytelling is about doing things in a different way from the way you've been doing them. And my wish for all of you is, after this workshop, you get some of the tools, you feel inspired and engaged enough and motivated enough to try it. Because this is something that you've got to give it a shot before you decide whether it's working or what's working and what's not for you. Let's talk about why storytelling, and I'll give you 5 reasons why storytelling is so critical. And I'm also going to move towards business storytelling now. First reason, we need to influence and inspire. Whether you're a manager, individual contributor, a senior leader, all of our roles today require us to influence and inspire people. Yes? You don't need to be in sales to be required to influence people, and you don't need to be a senior leader to have to inspire people, right? It's become a part of the role of anybody who deals with people. So we need to influence and we need to inspire. Let me give you an example, a business example, and help you understand how storytelling works. So one of the clients I was coaching in Malaysia, his name is Mark, and he heads in Malaysia. He's the head of one of the largest tech companies in the world. And he's the Malaysia country head for that tech organization. I'm not at liberty to disclose the organization's name. And I was coaching him for an upcoming event where Mark had to speak. And I'm doing a lot of storytelling work with the leadership team of this company. So Mark came to me through that. And I sat down with Mark and I said, okay, what's happening? So it's a big event where Mark is really presenting to chief marketing heads and brand heads of big brands in Malaysia. And I asked Mark, I said, what's your objective? He said, my objective is I want these brands to come on our digital platform. for advertising and I want to convince them. So it's a pitch. I said, okay, how much time do you have? He said, I've got about 20 minutes. I said, all right, great. So one of the first questions I ask people is, what's your key message? And you'll soon understand the importance and the relevance of the key message and why it's more important than the story. If you go back to the flying analogy that I shared, the key message is the landing. The key message is the runway. The story is flying the plane. So you've got to land the story on the key message, right? So I asked Mark, I said, Mark, so what's your key message? And Mark looks at me quite confidently and he goes, well, my key message is 40% of advertising spend is going digital, so must you. I said, okay, that sounds exciting. That sounds compelling. And he was pretty happy. He showed me the slide that said this. 40%. He said, that's my key message. I said, great. But then I had a concern. I said, Mark, if these are all marketing and brand leaders, shouldn't they already know this? And he was a little stumped. He said, yeah, actually, they already know that 40% of advertising spend is digital. I said, so why are we telling them what they already know? He said, no. What we're trying to tell them is that they need to go digital and all. So as I dug deeper, I said, so why aren't they going digital? He said, no, they're actually going digital. I said, if they're going digital, why are we asking them to go digital? He said, no. So it took me a little of digging deeper. And what I did with him is what you need to do with yourself, brainstorming with yourself. And finally, Mark said, the problem is really not that they're not going digital. The problem is they are going digital. They're just not going digital with us. I said, hang on. That changes the entire context. So you're speaking to a bunch of people who are taking their business somewhere else and you want them to bring their business to you. I said, is that the problem? He said, yes. I said, how is telling them the 40% of advertising spend is going digital going to help them with that? And I realized, lesson number one, as speakers, as leaders, as motivators, as coaches, very often what we choose to say is what we like to say. What we choose to say is what we like to say. Because it emerged with Mark when I asked him, why are you writing the sentence? He said, the sentence sounds powerful. I said, theek hai yaar, it sounds powerful, but is it conveying anything for them? So we have to shift our axis from saying what we want to say to what the audience needs to hear. It's always about your people, whether it's your team members, your customers, your stakeholders, whoever it is. And then we went deeper and as I asked him, I said, Mark, so what's the problem? Why aren't people, going digital with you? What's really happening? So he started explaining and he said, because they think that our product is complex and complicated and the competitors is easier to use. That's why they're going there, not coming to us because our product is complex and complicated. Mark used the word complex and complicated repeatedly with me again and again in explaining why the customer was not with them. That was a cue for me because storytelling is also about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, using a lot of anchor words. So I worked with Mark and here's the final result of what Mark did. So before and after, before using storytelling, what Mark would have done, which he thankfully did not, but Mark would have gone on the stage in front of marketing officers who are giving their business somewhere else. He wants to get their business, digital advertising. He would have gone on stage with the first slide and said, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about the fact that 40% of advertising spend is going digital and so must you. Let me show you how we can help. Imagine what they'd be thinking. Yaar, hum to pichle 1.5 saal se kar rahe hain, hame abhi bata raha hai tu. We already know this. We're just not going with you. Versus what he did later, after he created his narrative. So now Mark went on stage and I've got an actual recording of him doing this. This happened about 1.5 years, 2 years back, just before COVID hit. So Mark goes on stage and Mark says, good morning, everyone. Really excited to be here. When I joined my college about 18 years back, I had to choose a subject that I had to major in. And I decided to choose finance. A lot of my friends told me that time that why are you picking up such a complex and complicated subject? Insert keyword. But I said, no, finance is what I want to study. But it's only after the first semester, late one night, studying up, cramming up for my finance exam the next morning that I realized maybe I'd made a mistake because the subject, finance, was really, really complex and complicated. Repeat the keyword. It was so frustrating at times. It was really frustrating. It was difficult, very, very complicated subject. But cutting a long story short, I passed out of my college with pretty good grades. And the reason I share this with you is because today I run the organization in Malaysia for the last 4 years and we've been able to demonstrate great financial returns only because of my understanding of what I went through this complex and complicated subject of finance. And marketing leaders, brand leaders, the reason I share this with you today is through this experience, the lesson that I learned is sometimes things that are complex and complicated are the ones that actually give you results. Now, I know many of you may be thinking that our product is a little complex and complicated, and I understand that. We're trying to work on it to make it better, but it's also the product that gives real results. Let me show you how. Do you see what I mean? It's changing the entire narrative to what you want to convey, right? So love to see a few comments on how you found the story. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. Say yes, no, exciting, good, bad, ugly, whatever you want to put down there in a word or two to describe how you found that. I see a few smileys also. You can use the emoticons or you can use the chat. Okay, Karan liked it. I hope some others too as well. So that's what storytelling helps us do. It gets people ready to receive your point of view. Storytelling helps people get ready to receive your point of view. Yeah. Now let me ask you another question. How many of you, because we need to understand the difference between story and your data, story and your slides, right? People say, I have my slides, should I convert them to a story? What are we doing, right? How many of you have ever gotten your house painted by painters, by professionals, by painters? Ghar pe kabhi painting karai hai during festival time or something? Give me a yes if you've gotten your house painted ever. Okay, yeah, all right. So you understand how the process works, right? You understand how the process works. Now, you could go to the market and you could buy the most expensive paint, Dulux ka ya, kaun sa wo Asian, Royal Asian paints ka, you know, velvet touch or whatever you call it, right? You can buy the Berger, right? You can buy the most expensive paint. But before you apply the paint on the wall, what do you need to do to the wall before you put the paint on the wall? Put down in the chat window for me. Let's see who knows this. Let's see who've done the recent renovation. Yeah, priming. Absolutely. You got to rub the sandpaper and you got to put the primer on the wall. Correct? Now, if you don't rub with the sandpaper, don't put the primer on your wall, if you straight away put the paint, what do you think is likely to happen after 6-7 months? What do you think will happen after 6-7 months? If you don't put the primer, what will happen if you just put the paint straight away? Paint will chip off. The paint will not stick. It will start chipping off. It will peel off. But when you prime the wall with a primer, when you treat it, when you sand it, and then you put the paint sticks. Your story is your primer. Your story will make your message stick. Your story is your primer. Your story is what makes your message stick. You can have a very powerful message, but if people aren't ready to receive it, it's not going to stick. Stories get people ready to receive your point of view. I hope that makes sense. Yeah. So that's the first reason why storytelling is so powerful. The second reason I want to talk to you about, and while I do that, let me just put my laptop on charge. Second, we need to change the tide and show a new path. Now, storytelling is a great tool to paint a vision. It's a great tool to paint a vision for you as a leader. If you want to change the tide, if you want to change the course, if you want to show a new path, create a vision for people, storytelling is a great tool. In fact, in the full training that I do, where I train people on the 8 patterns of storytelling, one of the patterns is just for that, just for this. And it's called the Just Imagine pattern. It's about creating a vision for the future that you want the person to see. Let me give you another business example. I was doing this work in Bangalore many years back with the marketing and the business development leaders of an app development company. And as I took them through the training, as I took them through the 8 patterns, I explained the Just Imagine pattern. One of the leaders in the workshop, Vikram, he came to me and he said, Gatik, I really like this pattern, and we were doing practice. He said, I've got an upcoming pitch. I want to try using the Just Imagine pattern. I said, okay. So I said, what's your current pitch like? So Vikram was pitching to a travel company 3-4 years back, basically pitching to them that we can build an app for you that can improve your customer experience. So Vikram, before using the storytelling pattern, His pitch was pretty straightforward. His pitch was, we are Acme company, ABC company, this is our vision, this is our mission, this is what we do, this is how we can add value, these are our features, here's a demo. Typical pitch. What Vikram did after using the Just Imagine pattern is that he starts off his pitch something like this. He starts off by saying, good morning. Now imagine he's pitching to his travel company. And he starts off by saying, good morning, everyone. Just imagine. Now, Just Imagine story always starts with the words just imagine. So Vikram goes there and starts off, says, just imagine one of your customers, Peter, has got a flight from Delhi to New York in the next 10 days. Now just imagine today, 10 days before the flight, Peter wakes up to the alarm going off on his iPhone next to his bed. And as he wakes up to turn off the alarm, integrated with the app for the alarm is a small notification from us that pops up. As he switches off his alarm, a small notification pops up reminding him that he needs to pack a black belt, which he forgot the last time, thanks to our artificial intelligence. Now just imagine, 5 days before the flight, Peter's in office running from one meeting to another. And as he finishes one meeting and he's going for the other meeting, he takes out his iPhone to look at the calendar, and integrated with the calendar app is our app, and a message pops up asking him whether he wants the cab to pick him up from office or from his residence on the day of the flight. Now just imagine on the day of the flight, Peter reaches the airport in the cab that's been sent by your company, and the moment he steps out of the car at the airport, he's greeted by a professional-looking host from your company who greets him by first name thanks to our facial recognition software and says, Peter, thank you so much. My name is so-and-so. I'm going to guide you right till boarding. And this host from your company guides Peter through the entire boarding process, and Peter has an amazing, amazing experience. Just imagine if we could make this a reality for all your customers. My name is Vikram. I'm from ABC Company, and I'm here to show you how we can make this possible. You see that? Now that's a Just Imagine pattern in action. You could use this in a sales situation. You could use this in an influence attempt. You could use this to show a vision to your people. It's really about showing 3 or 4 elements of the future that you want to show. Again, a few items in the chat window or a few emoticons telling me how you found this example, the Just Imagine pattern. How do you find it? How do you find the Just Imagine pattern? Emoticons or chat window. Fantastic, somebody says. Amazing, great, yeah. And this is just one of the 8 patterns. The first one I shared with you, Mark's example in Malaysia, that's called a Springboard story pattern, right? And this can be applied to so many different business contexts, right? Internal, external, sales, influence, town halls. Number 3, why storytelling? We need to establish credibility faster and deeper. Our jobs are changing, our roles are changing, the world is changing, but what's not changing is the need to establish credibility. And we need to establish credibility really quick, really fast, right? And very often I ask people, how many times have you been asked this innocent question at a networking forum? And these days in the virtual setup, there's so many networking forums. I recently attended a networking forum on this brilliant platform called Zuddle, where you can kind of get into breakout rooms as if you're actually attending an event, and you can exchange your LinkedIn profiles. It's pretty cool. So I suddenly found myself in a room with 4 strangers, right, from the HR community, my potential clients. And when you find yourself in a situation like that, one of the most innocent questions that people would ask you when they meet you for the first time would be what? What's the innocent question that people ask you? Give me in the chat window. When they meet you at an event, at a networking forum like this, what are some of the questions that may come your way? Imagine a forum where you're having coffee with somebody looks at you and says, what do you do? There you go, Asta. Absolutely, a very innocent question. Somebody will look at me and say, hey, Gatik, okay, I see under your name it says trainer, or I don't see that. So tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Now, the moment somebody asks us this innocent question, what do you do? Now, here's the problem. This question, what do you do, or tell me a little bit about yourself, we're all hardwired. We're all hardwired because where have we heard this question most often? Tell me something about yourself. What do you do? Where have we heard this question most often? Come on, give me in the chat window. Interviews, that is right. What do you do? Tell me about yourself. हम सब ने ये सवाल interviews में सुना है. Some of us 3 times, some of us 30 times, whatever the case be, right? And therefore, when we're in a networking forum where the objective is completely different, and you're in a completely different space, but somebody asks you, so what do you do? Tell me about yourself. You'd say, well, I'm in with the advisory services, and I've been there for the last 8 years, and I manage this function. And prior to that, I was with for about 8 years. And before that, I started my career actually with where I was, in the tax side of things, in the indirect tax, and that's where I did about 4 years. पूरा resume हम सुना देते हैं उसको, right? Some people will go back to their MBA also. And what was the question asked? What do you do, or tell me something about yourself? Now, that innocent question is an opportunity for you to build resonance with that person. The way I try to introduce myself with an intent to create a connection, create some relatedness. Why is it going to help me if you relate to me? Because it's going to be easier for me to convey some of my messages to you, isn't it? But we feel that's the only opportunity where somebody is asked, what do I do? Ki sab kuch udhar hi suna dena humne, right? So those are opportunities to tell stories, to tell what is called pattern number 2, who am I, or your genesis story or your backstory. And these can be short 30-second stories as well. When somebody says, who are you? What do you do? Tell me about yourself. Do you have a story for that? Right? And I often tell people to have a 2-minute story, a 4-minute story, and a 7-minute story ready. 3 different stories with 3 different key messages, telling about 3 different things about you. Ready always, because a storyteller needs to have stories. Stories are not going to fall in your lap. We've got to craft stories and be ready to tell the stories, right? So that's reason number 3. Reason number 4 and 5 coming up real quick for you. What's reason number 4? Convincing people that this will work. Stories help to convince people this will work. I'm going to flip to the next slide and talk to you about why that happens, because stories can literally suspend disbelief. And I'll give you a very important data point from neuroscience to establish that fact, that stories can literally suspend disbelief. It can make the unreal appear real. Actually, our politicians do that pretty well. So stories, we already know, can suspend disbelief, sometimes in the wrong way, but we've got to use it right. And finally, people forget the value of what you share, but stories stick better than charts or slides. Stories stick better than charts or slides. You know why? Let me ask you this question. Ready in the chat window. How many of you have ever been in a situation where, hopefully before the lockdown and all was there, or after the lockdown goes over? So think back before the lockdown times. Imagine you're walking down in a mall, and as you walk down in a mall, you bump into somebody that you know. You've seen that person, you've seen this person after a long time, you recognize the face, and you meet other, oh, kya haal hai yaar, long time, man, what's up, what are you up to? And you have this quick chat, but you're in a hurry, the person is in a hurry, you go your own ways, and the moment the person leaves, you're to yourself, yaar, iska naam kya hai yaar? What's her name? What's his name? How many of you have experienced this? You remember the faces, but you forget the names. How many of you have experienced that? Karan says yes. Harpreet says yes. SP says yes. Very, very, very often, several times. And here's the reason for that. Our brain is wired to retain visuals longer, far longer than text. Our brain is wired to retain visuals far longer than it retains text, which is why we remember faces and we forget names. Now, storytelling, the established rule number 1, is a visual process. You remember that? It's a visual experience, and because it's a visual experience, it stays longer. The experience, my introduction story, you may forget a lot that I share with you in this workshop, in this masterclass, but my story, you're likely to retain longer than anything else. Mark's story of Malaysia, you'll retain longer. Vikram's Just Imagine story, mobile app company, you'll retain longer. And that's the power of why stories are so powerful. I was telling you about neuroscience. I'll tell you what makes stories so powerful from a neuroscience perspective. So this is recent advancement in medical science. When I say recent, about 15 years old, we now have very, very accurate brain MRIs. You all know what brain MRIs are, brain scans are. Those are for the uninitiated. If you've seen in the movies, a person is sitting, a lot of wires attached to the brain, connected to the computer screen, lines going up and down. So today, with a very high level of accuracy, scientists, medical professionals can diagnose what's happening in the brain when you give an input, what part of the brain gets wired up. The heat maps, what area is going red, what area is going yellow, all of that happens, right? Brain MRIs. Now, brain is broadly divided into 8 regions. Many, many more, but broadly divided into 8 regions. And we now have conclusive evidence that when a person receives information, imagine a person sitting with all those wires on the screen, when a person receives information in form of data, so somebody's talking data or just showing data, it activates 2 out of the 8 regions of the brain, okay, including the prefrontal cortex, our thinking side. But when a person receives information in form of a story, it activates as many as 7 out of the 8 regions of the brain. 7 out of the 8 regions of the brain get activated, including a central area, the Broca's region of our brain also, which is responsible for movement. 7 regions get activated and multiple chemicals get released in the body, including oxytocins. How else do you explain it? Let me give you an example to illustrate this happens. How many of you have ever seen a movie with a high-speed car chase? Give me a yes there. Give me a yes. Fast and Furious or something like that, right? You've seen, right? Have you seen an action movie? It probably has a high-speed car chase in any case, right? So imagine you're sitting at home in this large, home theater room of yours, large television. You're sitting comfortably on this recliner. You're watching this movie, high-speed car chase. The car swerves and you're watching it. Suddenly the car swerves left in the screen. And as the car swerves left, you go. Yes or no? How many of you agree with that? Give me a yes if you agree with that. When you swerve, when you see the car swerve, why do you do that? You know you are not in the car, but your body behaves as if you're in the car. How else do you explain it? When you, more than automatic reflexes, Preeti, you're right, automatic reflexes, but a little bit more than automatic reflexes. I'll explain. How else do you explain it? When you see an ad for a burger or a pizza on a television screen, what happens? Now, these guys are smart. They know how to tell a story behind a burger and a pizza, right? How do they show a burger ad? The way they show, I started getting hungry. The way they show a burger ad is first the bun will fall, tabak, 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 right? Then on that, a nice aloo tikki or a chicken patty will fall, tabak, tabak, tabak. On that, a fresh, crispy leaf of lettuce with droplets of water. On that, one red, nicely sliced tomato, fresh, absolutely red. And on that, you squeeze that white mayo they show. Then another bun falls on top. 2 hands come and squish it, and the mayo is, dripping out. And the person comes and picks it up and takes a huge bite. How do you feel? Your mouth starts salivating. Yes or no? Give me a yes if that happens when you watch an ad. Right? Why does that happen? Because the logical part of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, is telling you that is not real. It is not real. But the Broca's region, the other parts of your brain tell, shut up, we are taking over. That's the impact of the psychology on the physiology. Stories have a huge impact on the psychology and therefore the physiology of people. It can change the way your body language moves. It can change the way you think. It can change the way people think. All the greatest politicians who've ever had campaign speeches, that's a lot of storytelling. And they use pattern number 7, which is leading people into the future. Yes, we can is an example of leading people into the future. Achhe din aayenge is an example of leading people into the future, right? So all of these are examples of leading people into the future. And stories can help you create the connection between psychology and physiology. That's why extremely, extremely powerful. There's enough and most research around storytelling, how it's also more effective than data, and especially effective if you combine the two. But let's decode storytelling a little bit and go deeper and try and understand how does storytelling work in the business context of things. So here's a question for you. What forums, so please type in the chat window, what forums do you think you can use storytelling in? What forums or situations could you use storytelling in the work context? Let's see in the chat window your responses. What forums or situations can you use storytelling in? Breaking ice, of course. Town halls, yes, absolutely town halls. Presentations, okay. Trainings, okay. Anyway, we need to engage somebody, client pitch, team meeting, approval of a business case, leadership talk, conferences. Absolutely. Absolutely. Pep talk, giving a pep talk to people. internally. Absolutely. And that's the point, really. Storytelling can be used in a variety, in a myriad of contexts, in a huge variety of situations, whether it's one-to-one or one-to-many. Even when you're giving feedback, even when you're having coaching conversations with people, you can use stories. Extremely, extremely powerful skill that we can use in many, many different situations. And the work that we do in storytelling is based on what we call the two pillars of storytelling. At TransformMe, the two pillars of storytelling are telling the right story and telling the story right. And in telling the right story, it's really about identifying your key message, identifying which out of the 8 patterns should you use in this situation, and then figuring out how do you deliver it in the right way, whether you're doing it virtual, one-to-one, or one-to-many. And there are a couple of elements there. Neeta started off the session talking about characters. Characters is one of the elements to keep in mind when you're telling the story. So we're going to take a look at some of these patterns and talk about how this works. But even before that, most important thing that we've got to understand, and now we're getting into the science of storytelling. We've already gotten into it, but getting a little bit into the structure of storytelling. The first thing we've got to remember is that storytelling is a form of communication. It's a form of expressing, it's a form of communication. And when we can communicate in one of two ways. We can communicate in one of two ways. The first way in which we can communicate is what we call the inductive style. What's the inductive style? The inductive style is about giving your key message and then explaining it. And I told you that I'm going to use this word key message over and over again. Some people get irritated because I use it excessively, because for me, the key message is more important than the story. If you don't have the runway, what use is it to fly a plane? So the key message, so inductive style is you tell people what you want to tell them and then you explain it, right? It's a pretty straightforward way, and that's the kind of result that you may get in an attempt to influence or inspire or engage if you use an inductive style, right? The second way of expressing is what is called the deductive style. So inductive and deductive. Deductive comes from the word deduce, right? If somebody can tell me in the chat window, what do you understand by the word deduce? What do you think would the meaning of deduce be? Deduce. Let's see in the chat window. To arrive at something based on the information received, right? So did they deduce? Absolutely. Derive the meaning indirectly. Absolutely. Deduce is about connecting the dots and deriving a meaning. When you use a deductive style, you're making the audience do some hard work. It's important for them to connect the dots. So you're not making it very obvious. You're making them engaged in your story and making them connect the dots, saying, ah. But which also means that if you don't do it well, they could get lost and say, what the hell are you talking about? Which also happens if you don't tell the story right. Yeah. So deductive style, the biggest difference in the deductive style from the inductive style is that in the inductive style, you start with the key message and then you explain it. Whereas in a deductive style, the key message is not the start point, but the key message is the arrival point. You arrive at your key message in a deductive style, and you arrive at your key message through a story. So you start with a story and you arrive at the key message. Does that make sense? How many of you remember Mark's story in Malaysia? Give me a yes if you remember Mark's story in Malaysia. Yeah, you remember that. Okay, cool. Yeah. How many of you remember what was his key message? What was he trying to tell the brand and marketing people? Just type that in. What was his key message? What was his key message? No, that 40% was his first key message. What is his actual key message? Go digital with us. Hiring Mark's firm for digitization. You should. They're a pretty good firm. Complex and complicated, absolutely. Sometimes gives returns, absolutely. Sometimes complex situations give results, absolutely. That was his key message. His key message was that sometimes things that are complex and complicated are the ones that give you results, right? Now, if he had used an inductive style, means that he would have gone up on stage and he would have started off saying, good morning, everyone. I know our product is complex and complicated, but it gives results. I'm here to tell you how we can deliver results. Sure, you're accepting it, but there's no punch, there's no appeal, this emotional appeal is missing. The relatedness, the connection, the credibility is missing. The moment you build a story, a narrative around that, and through that narrative, you arrive at the key message. The same key message that you would have said without the story, when you say it with the story, it's a lot more believable. It's a lot more relatable. It's a lot more inspiring. It's a lot more engaging. It's a lot more connected. You see what I'm saying? And that's really the craft that we've got to master. How do we understand the real pain point of the audience that we're speaking to? How do we then backtrack and find out what's the key message from that? And how do we then build a story? So it's really a process of reverse engineering from understanding what is it that needs to be said. I'll give you another business example. I'm reading a private chat around an epiphany moment. Yeah. So let me give you another example to help you understand the difference between inductive and deductive style. So another tech organization I was coaching, and I was working with Sam, one of the product leaders. And Sam, I was coaching him because he had to make a pitch to a client, and he wanted to use storytelling in it because he'd understood the value of it. The context was pretty simple. Sam was working with this. So Sam's company was a service provider to this client, and they were working with this client to improve the level of personalization for their customers. Personalization is when you're on an app and you start searching for something and suddenly you keep getting ads for that. So that's kind of personalization, an example at a very broad level. So Sam's company was helping their client with personalization, and things were going well. And when I spoke with Sam, I asked him, so what do you want to do? He said, Sam said, I want to help my client understand that his customers also want privacy, not just personalization. And he needs to add some tools to his portfolio. And we can provide those tools to balance between, you're doing a lot of personalization, but you need to have privacy also. Customers are wanting it now because they're realizing, ki boss, theek hai, personalization mein maza aa gaya, but now I need privacy. I'm sure many of you can relate to that, right? And I said, so what's the challenge? He said, well, the challenge is that the customer doesn't seem to think that privacy is a big concern. He doesn't want to invest in it. He says, let's just continue personalization. But I know things will go south if he doesn't do that now. So we worked and we spoke. I won't take you through the entire coaching process that I did with him, but Sam came up with this story where he went to his client and he actually told his client. So he actually signed up with this client, first of all. That's the result. And he started off his conversation with the client, telling his client that, I've got 2 kids, and just recently it was my younger daughter's birthday. Not recently, about 8-10 months back, it was my younger daughter's birthday, and I decided to gift her a bag, a school bag. And online I had and he used an online example because the client is an online merchant, as you can imagine. So he said, online I found a nice concept of a school bag that you can completely personalize. And he's telling his client that. So I could put my daughter's name, her picture, her favorite food, her favorite destination, this, that, her favorite band, and all of that. So I got that bag made with all of her favorite things, and I gave it to my daughter who's 6 years old, and she loved it. She was so happy. She gave me the tightest hug and she said, you're the greatest dad ever. Thank you so much. Such a personal gift. I love it. I'm going to show it off to my friends. It has all my favorite things. And then Sam said that, about 1 month back, it was my elder daughter's birthday, who's 16 years old. And I decided to do the same thing for her. I bought an online bag, which I could personalize with all of her favorite things, her name, photographs, favorite food, favorite people, favorite rock band. And I got all that collage made on a bag. And I gifted my 16-year-old daughter that bag on her birthday a few days back. I have never seen my daughter so angry, Sam said. She was really upset. She said, how dare you? Why would you do that? I said, what do you mean? These are your favorite things? She said, yes, these are my favorite things, but I don't want the world to know everything about me. I respect my privacy, and I wish you would too. And that's the day I realized that as kids evolve, at one point of time, they thrive on personalization, but as they become bigger, they start needing their privacy. And consumer behavior is not that different. Consumers want a lot of personalization early on in the cycle on the online merchant place. But as they evolve in their journey, after a point of time, they start really wanting their privacy. And I'm here to talk to you about how we can strike a balance between the two for you by using product A in conjunction with product B. Do you see what I'm saying? Can I get any comments in the window? How did you find the story connecting with? Are you seeing the primer and the paint? The inductive and the deductive? The getting people ready to receive your message? Are you seeing that come through in some of these examples? Yeah? Okay, and like this, there are numerous examples that I can give you in the work context where stories work. I can also give you a few examples where stories haven't worked. So I'm not saying that stories work in all situations, but they certainly work in many situations. And they certainly work in many more situations than our mind would initially tell us. You know, like that friend of mine or the client of mine sometimes who thinks they're Nostradamus and they can predict that it's not going to work. Give you the framework. So TransformMe, our company, we've been doing this work for the last 10 years now. And we are the pioneers of storytelling in India. In Australia, we're one of the few organizations that does this work, and even the rest of the world, we're one of the few organizations that do this work. And over the last 10 years, we've strengthened our understanding of what works in corporates, what doesn't. We've done a lot of research ourselves, primary and secondary, to understand what's working and what's not. And through that, we've come up with a very simple framework of storytelling, which we call TransformMe's triple loop formula. Now, this is really important for you, and this is where the rubber meets the road. This is an implementation hack. Take a picture of the slide if you want to, because this is really bringing together how storytelling works. Now, the first thing to understand is that you're only as good a storyteller as the stories you have. You're only as good a storyteller as the stories you have. You've got to imagine yourself as a storyteller, as a magician. And here's a question for you. How many of you have seen a magic trick ever? A magic show? Just give me a yes as your kid's party or some show or something. Just give me a yes so I know most of you have seen a magic show. So you know a magic show, right? Great. So you know magicians, right? Great. Now here's another question for you. At a magic show, fill in the blanks. At a magic show, a magician would never go without his, fill in the blanks. What would a magician never go without? Hat. Okay, what else? Coat, wand, tricks. Ace up his sleeve, magic stick. Absolutely. A magician would never go to a magic show without his or her props. They would never go without the props. Which is why you're on a magic show and suddenly he takes out a kabutar from here, a pigeon from here. Like, wow, magic. अरे magic थोड़ी है. वो 2 घंटे से पहले से उसने दबा के रखा हुआ पिजन को ऐसे रखा हुआ तो you can't see it, right? That's preparation. That's not magic. It's preparation, right? Similarly, a storyteller, you cannot afford to go for a meeting, to go for a town hall, to go for a situation where you want to inspire with a story without a story. You can't land up and say, just before my meeting, I'll remember my God and the story will fall on my laps. I wish it happened like that. It won't. The story won't just pop into your head unless you're extremely spontaneous as a person who can think on their feet extremely fast. I can't, so I need to prepare. So a storyteller is only as good as the stories you have. And therefore, to be a good storyteller, we need to start learning how to craft some stories. I've already given you a beginner's toolkit. You should have at least 3 stories to introduce yourself when somebody asks you, what do you do? Tell me about yourself, rather than reading out your resume. A 2-minute story, a 4-minute story, a 7-minute story. Those are your 3 stories. Second, copy shamelessly. I've shared with you a lot of stories. Make them your own. Change them. Stay true to them. Don't say this was me. Say this happened to a coach of mine or a client of mine or somebody that I know. You're still authentic, but you can use somebody else's story. As long as you don't say it's my story, it's absolutely fine, right? And TransformMe's triple loop formula will help you craft the stories as you go through it. TransformMe triple loop formula goes from the outside to the end, basically saying that whenever you have to craft a story, you have to first work through the context. Go back to my conversation with Mark from Malaysia, sitting down with him, asking him first question, what's your key message? That's happening in the context. He says 40% of blah, blah. I said, no. Why are we doing this? Don't they already know this? Okay, what are we trying to tell them? Oh, why are they with your competitors? Why not with you? Okay, complex, complicated. All of that is happening in the context. This is the dialogue that you're having with yourself. This is where you're asking yourself the questions that need to be asked. Questions like, what do they need to hear? Not just what do I want to say. What's going on in their mind? What is it that I really want to address? Think of a simple business presentation, or think of a presentation to a senior stakeholder where you're asking for funds for a project. You're asking for a budget for an initiative that you want to launch. Now, you may think that my key message is give me the money and this is the results. No. And you think of the context, you say, who am I pitching to? I'm pitching to this partner at EY. Okay. What kind of a person is he or she? Okay. He or she is that kind of a person. What does he or she like? Oh, he or she likes golf, likes cricket. Okay. What is my equation with this person? Oh, we met once, but doesn't know me much. Okay. Likes cricket, doesn't know me much, action oriented. Okay, great. Outcome, no. Relationship, no. You're getting as much information about the content. What's most important for me? What's going on in this person's mind? Oh, this partner is actually thinking that in these times we need to conserve our resources, financial resources. I'm asking for money. So they're probably thinking that, is it really worth it? Okay, is it really worth it? Okay, they're thinking that. And as you think of this, you'll come to the key message. You'll say, your key message could be something like, sometimes things that don't seem worth it, if you dig deeper, can really transform the entire culture of an organization. Now, think of that as the key message. I'm just giving an example. But the more you work through the context, the clearer you get about your key message. Here's my golden rule about the key message. The key message in storytelling, remember, the key message is the primer. It's not the paint. So don't make the key message the paint, which means don't make your key message transactional. Your point will come later. Your slides will come. But don't make the key message transactional. Instead, make the key message inspiring. Make the key message inspiring. A good key message for me is a key message that doesn't sound transactional, that sounds poetic, philosophical, inspiring, and then connects to the point. So think of this. Things that are complex or complicated drive results, right? As customers evolve over a period of time, they start thriving for privacy. So think beyond the transaction, and as you get to the key message, so once you've locked in, thought of the context, key message, now you reverse engineer. You say, now that I've got the key message is the runway. I want to land on this. Now, what flight route then am I going to take? Am I going to use this story to land here? Am I going to use this story? You'll come up with different narrative ideas. What if I tell a story about myself and I went through a problem like this? Or I tell a story of a client of mine. Or I tell the story of Steve Jobs. You can tell stories of so many different people. It doesn't always have to be your story. That is the process at a very bare nutshell. We spend about 1.5 hours decoding this triple loop formula, but at a very broad level, next meeting you have, next town hall you have, next presentation you have, think about your context, think about your key message. You will, if you're not spending more time on your key message than your story, you're doing something wrong. Your key message would take more time than your story. Crafting that simple one sentence sometimes takes the longest time, but that's really the key. The runway has to be firm. The runway has to be right. Only then can you land the plane safely. Yeah. So that's TransformMe's triple loop formula. I've been speaking to you about the 8 patterns of storytelling. I think it's high time that I shared with you what those 8 patterns are and give you a glimpse of some of these patterns and what they're all about. And then we're going to leave some time for our Q&A as well. Please think about your questions that you may have, thoughts you may have. Put the questions down in the chat window. I may ask you to copy and paste them again so we can pick up some questions. But maybe this is a good time also for you to start reflecting on any questions that you have. Pop them in. I'll pick them up during the Q&A, which will start in about 15 minutes or so. But do pop in the questions if you have any, and we can always go through that. I may request you just copy paste them and write them again if required. Yeah. All right, so let's talk about applying storytelling a little bit, and what does it take to apply storytelling in the business context? What does that look like? All right, so first of all, here are the 8 patterns of storytelling that I was talking about. Now, these 8 patterns are by a gentleman called Stephen Denning. Stephen Denning is the world's foremost thought leader in the space of business narratives. He's also the author of A Leader's Guide to Storytelling, one of the books that I'm heavily inspired by. In addition to that, any one of you looking at a lighter read on storytelling, I would recommend this book, The Storyteller's Secret by Carmine Gallo. That's the book that I would recommend. Very, very, very powerful book. easy to read, quick tips, easy tips to understand how storytelling works. All of this is in the business context. None of this is about putting your kids to bed stories. Okay, if you have some tips on that, please share with me. I struggle every night. Um, so the 8 patterns, as you can see there, sparking action, from sparking action to leading people into the future. These are 8 different kinds of stories. Patterns basically means different kinds of stories that you can use in your context. Now, the difference in this is really around what is your objective. The objective defines your pattern. What is your objective, and therefore what pattern do you want to use, right? Do you remember Mark's story? Mark, Malaysia, complex, complicated story. That's a sparking action story. Sam's story of the school bags for his daughters. That's also a sparking action story, right? Vikram's story of just imagine is number 8, leading people into the future pattern, right? What I'm asking you to create a 247, a 2-minute story, a 4-minute story, a 7-minute story. That's a must have for every storyteller. That's communicating who you are, your genesis story. That's really, really powerful, right? The storyteller's author is Carmine Gallo. I've just put it down there. Kiran and some others had a question. I've put it down there. So these are the different patterns of storytelling that we can use, which can really be powerful in your next influence attempt. Even fostering collaboration, for example, pattern number 5. How many of you manage teams? If you can give me a yes there, if you have a team reporting into you. Just getting a sense of how many of you manage teams. Okay, okay, quite a few of us manage teams, right? Now, as leaders and managers of teams, when we have to build bonding in the team, what we've typically done in the pre-COVID era is done team building exercises, right? And what those have really to do some team building, take people out, get them blindfolded, trust fall, and they have their value, they have their place. We do that as well. But you and I both know that that's more fun than really connecting and bonding at a deeper level, isn't it? The bonding really happens over conversations. Would you agree with me? Yes, no? Let's see. Yes, as if you agree with me. The bonding really happens over conversations, right? And that's where, for example, pattern number 5, fostering collaboration, is such a powerful pattern, and you can use it in virtual setups very powerfully. Now, fostering collaboration, pattern number 5, each of these patterns have their own way of telling the story, which is a process by itself. Fostering collaboration is what I also called bonfire stories. The name I've given to it is bonfire stories. And what are bonfire stories really? Bonfire stories, imagine a situation where you're sitting around the bonfire with a couple of friends and everybody's just chatting. It's a freewheeling conversation. Yeah, how many of you have been in that situation around a bonfire, just having a chat, having a conversation, having a cup of tea, coffee, or a beverage, and just having a chat, a freewheeling conversation? Or how many of you remember telling ghost stories sitting around a bonfire? Let's ask that. How many of you remember that? Ghost stories. Come on, give me a yes if you remember ghost stories around a bonfire, yeah? And all the shadows suddenly start coming from nowhere, and suddenly all shadows have some meaning, right? We've done that. Now, fostering collaboration, storytelling pattern, is based on the premise that my story will make you think about your story. And you remember that happened in my intro story also. As I told you my story, many of you were thinking, he stood on stage. Even I remember I also stood on stage like that, and something like that. Or auto rickshaw, okay, I also sat in auto rickshaw. Oh, okay, his girlfriend, his wife helped him. Yeah, somebody's helped me also. So there are different parts that each one of you may have related to. Or he was shy, or I was shy too. And as I told you my story, you started going back in your life and thinking of your story. I remember when I was school, this happened with me, or I was sitting in the auto, or somebody helped me and this happened. My story makes you think of your story. Now, if I was doing this session with all of you, right now the objective is to teach you some of the aspects of storytelling. But if the objective that Neeta had given me was, Gatik, we want to improve the collaboration in this group. And if it was a much smaller group, say 7 or 10 people, and the objective was to improve collaboration, I may have still started with the same story, talking about how somebody helped me. and made a difference in my life. And that was my girlfriend then, my wife now, and how instrumental she was. If I'd stopped the story there, and if I had not said anything after that, if I was in silence, I can guarantee you, one of you would have automatically stepped in and said, everyone, I think even I've got a similar experience that I'd like to share. Without even being asked, somebody would step in. And that person would share their experience of how somebody helped them change their life. Listening to them, a third person would get inspired to share their story. A fourth person would get... That's called the power of the collective. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now imagine doing this with your team. And because you are the one setting the tone right, you can set it in whichever direction you want to work with the team. One person telling a deeply personal, but the important thing is that it's got to be an authentic story. It's got to be a deeply personal story. It could be a story that requires you to be a little vulnerable. Because when you come across as somebody when you are with your guards down, you're inspiring and encouraging others to put their guards down. In this team context, at least. I'm not asking you to use this with your clients. So bonfire stories can be very, very powerful for building stronger teams. Springboard stories are great stories to use to inspire people, internal or external stakeholders. Communicating who you are is great in any context where you have to introduce yourself to anybody. Pattern number 8 is brilliant to paint a vision for a client, internally for your people, and even for your client. If you're doing some path-breaking work that's going to revolutionize or that's going to change, leading people into the future is great. Pattern number 7, sharing knowledge, is very similar to the Springboard story. The only difference is the Springboard story talks about a past success, whereas sharing knowledge talks about a past failure. How many of you have heard of the name Stephen Elop? Just give me a yes if you've heard the name Stephen Elop. Or give me a no if you haven't heard the name, actually. Anything to get you to type. Okay, no, all right. Okay. How many of you have heard of the company Nokia? Can I get a yes or a no? Yeah, of course. Of course. I'm hoping for some of us, if we are from the same generation, our first cell phone would have been a Nokia. What was that model? The first one that came without the antenna. The first one with the antenna was the 6410 or something. The first one without the antenna was 3310. Nikhil is right. 3310, yeah. And playing that, I forget the name of the game. Yeah, the snake. Yeah, was it called the snake? No, I think it was called something else. Or was it called snake? Maybe, yeah. So Nokia. Now, one of the most popular corporate stories ever told is a narrative which was so powerful that it created a category for itself called the burning platform story. If you go on Google and if you type burning platform Nokia story, you'll get the entire memo that Stephen Elop was the CEO of Nokia at the helm of affairs when Nokia was struggling. And he wrote a memo to his employees talking about what a grave situation they were in. And the story was so powerful and so compelling that it created a category for itself called the burning platform story. So imagine this, the CEO of Nokia telling thousands of people that they may not have their job, very sensitive matter, but telling that through a story. I use this example when people ask me, is it okay to use a story in this situation or that situation? Such a sensitive situation, and it's publicly available. You go to Google, you type burning platform Nokia memo or Nokia story, you'll get the entire story. And that's a sharing knowledge pattern, because sharing knowledge is about sharing past mistakes made and sharing knowledge through that. It's a great pattern to use in coaching. It's a great pattern to use while giving feedback, while mentoring somebody. So as you can see, there are different patterns that you can use in different situations to make change happen, to help people understand the value of the message that you're giving. All right. So those are the 8 patterns of storytelling. I also told you that I'll share with you a little bit about the science behind the pattern. So each pattern has a different construct to it. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 patterns, the springboard pattern and the leading people into the future, the first and the last. which would be most relevant to the kind of people that we have attending this masterclass today. So those are the 8 patterns of storytelling. I also told you that I'll share with you a little bit about the science behind the pattern. So each pattern has a different construct to it. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 patterns, the Springboard Pattern and the leading people into the future, the first and the last, which would be most relevant to the kind of people that we have attending this masterclass today. Springboard Pattern, 5 steps to craft the story. Step 1, build clarity on your key message. Step 1 will always be build clarity on your key message. So step 1 is build clarity on your key message. Once you've got your key message, so again, before you do your key message, you're going through the context. Remember the triple root formula: context, key message, story. So context, why, who, what does she want to hear? What's going on in their mind? What do they think about it? Are they believers? Are they skeptics? What do they think about me? What are they likely to think? Blah, 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 blah. Once you've got clarity on your on your key message, a springboard story is like a spring. It goes back, it goes down to push you up, right? Springboard story goes into the past to push you into the future. And it's a past success to inspire people about the current situation, right? So Mark spoke about when he was in college, finance, complex and complicated. Remember? Sam spoke about getting his daughters 8 months back a gift, and that's how they behaved, therefore now. So this is what a springboard pattern looks like, past success. So once you've got your key message, okay, my key messages, things that are complex and complicated are the ones that drive results. Now I need to go to step 2. I need to think of a similar past situation, similar problem to solve. Similar problem to solve. So what are we trying to solve for, right? What is a similar situation that I can look for? I'll give you an example. I was recently working with, not recently, again, I shouldn't use the word recently. I use it excessively, I've noticed. Again, about a year back. A year back, I was speaking to a co-working company here in Sydney. You heard of co-working companies, right? So I was talking to a co-working company here in Sydney and helping them build their brand narrative for their salespeople. And through a couple of workout sessions and conversations, we came up with the brand narrative of how when you work in a community, you grow faster. And as a co-working space, we provide that community so that you can grow faster because the ecosystem is right. So when you're in a community, you grow faster. And once they got that key message, then they say, okay, what story can I use? And they themselves came up with the story to pitch to this particular client of theirs who likes tennis. Now the client likes tennis, and this client of mine, Ryan, he used the story. He's telling his client, he says, and he's pitching his services to this co-working space. And this is Ryan talking to the client who likes tennis. And he says, you know what? I just need to tell you, let's call the client Jim. I don't remember the client's name. Let's call him Jim. So Ryan says, Jim, you know what? Many years back, I used to take coaching lessons for tennis, when I was in college. And my father insisted that I take personal one-on-one coaching lessons for tennis, and I did. And I used to go to one of the most renowned coaches in the Burnside area, and he used to coach me in tennis, and I did that a couple of months. And my game was improving. And then after about 2 months, I met this friend of mine, and this friend of mine was going to a different coaching academy for tennis, and we decided to play a few games. And as I played with my friend after 2 months, I realized how great his game was. And I was struggling to pick up his serves, and his lobs were beautiful, and I realized his game had really improved. So obviously he beat me black and blue in the game, and after the game I asked him, I said, so Nick, what happened? How's your game so great, man? What are you doing? He just said, I go to this club, and that's where I learn. What about you? Where are you learning from? I said, I learned from one coach. He said, yeah, because, Nick said that I guess the advantage I have is that every day I'm playing with different players. Every day I'm playing with different players and learning different techniques to overcome different problems. And I'm not just learning from one person, I'm learning from a lot of people. And then Ryan went on to tell Jim, and saying, Jim, that's when I realized that when you work in a community, you can grow much faster and get the results you want. And that's what we bring to your organization, right? So it's about thinking about a similar past situation, problem to solve, but you're checking for audience relevance. Likes tennis, can I bring in a tennis story? Result-oriented, can I become So you're always thinking of audience relevance, right? Number 3, build the character, context, and dilemma. Every story needs to have a character, and there has to be a dilemma, a problem worth solving. Those are the twists and turns that make a story worth listening to, right? Craft the character's experience till outcome. That's step number 4. You're taking them through the entire journey. Add specific scenes. Every story should have at least one scene that has a visual that will be imprinted on the people's minds. Instead of saying, I met him in his office, try saying, I still remember it was October, it was getting cold, and in the afternoon we were sitting in his office and the sun was streaming and it was a beautiful sight. I've just given you a visual. You see, so at least one. You don't have to overdo it, but at least give them one visual to anchor, to hold on to in the story. And finally, with the story, then transition to the current state or the problem worth solving without getting into the solution. So, Jim, that's the day I realized that when you work in a community, you grow and evolve much faster. So you've transitioned to the current problem statement. You're not given it a solution, saying, let me tell you how. Because solution is the paint. You're still just putting the primer on, right? So that's the Springboard Pattern. I hope that gives you an understanding of what the Springboard Pattern is. Prabhakar may not be able to hear me. I hope the others are able to hear me all right. Just give me a yes if you can hear me. And I know I'm not talking in the air. Okay, great. Prabhakar, I hope you've been able to figure out or work out whatever the issue was. And then we come to pattern number 8, the just imagine pattern. Remember Vikram saying his travel company, just imagine Peter, your customer has a flight from Delhi to New York. Remember that? That was a just imagine pattern. So first, again, build clarity on your key message. That's the first step. Always stays the same. Now look at step number 2. Craft the narrative evoking the future. 2 to 4 aspects of the future you want the audience to see. 2 to 4 is the magic number. So in Vikram's story, there were 3. Number 1, Peter wakes up, alarm goes off on the iPhone. That's number 1. Number 2, Peter going from meeting to meeting and gets a notification. Number 3, Peter reaches the airport and he's greeted by a host from your company. Remember, 3 parts of the future. So 2 to 4 is a good number. Look at number 3. Focus on the pleasure of the outcome, not the pain of the journey. So when you're telling a narrative, which is just imagine narrative, at the beginning, you're talking about the pleasure of the outcome, not the pain of the journey. If you talk about the pain of the journey, it becomes more like a sharing knowledge story, right? And even in that, you don't tell the pain of the journey too quickly. So focus on the pleasure of the outcome, not the pain of the journey. Show them that they're having a cocktail on the beach. How they got there, you'll talk about it later. Not that you're hiding that information, but this is about showing a vision, right? So the politician is not going to say, yes, we can. It's going to be bloody difficult. We're going to lose a lot of money and all of that will happen. But yes, we can. No, you just say, yes, we can. So that's the important thing about the outcome, the pleasure of the outcome. Build a character or make it you. So just imagine story is best told from the lens of a character. Like in Vikram's story, the character was your customer, Peter. Imagine your customer, Peter. Now, if you're trying to inspire your team, you could always say, just imagine you 3 years down the line are sitting in your performance appraisal and you're asking yourself, am I going to get the promotion? Just imagine you've been doing this. Just imagine. So it can be you, right? So it's important to have that character that they can see the story. Whose eyes am I seeing the story from? And then transition to the future that you want to create. Again, don't get into the solution yet because that's the paint that will come, okay? So those are the 2 ways or the 2 patterns that I wanted to quickly share with you because these are the 2 that you're likely to use most often. And there are a lot more tips that I keep giving on LinkedIn through the videos. So join in there and you'll get some resources also that we keep putting up there through videos. I want to next talk to you about, remember the 2 pillars, telling the right story and telling the story right. Those are the 2 pillars. So we've spoken about telling the right story, which is about identifying which pattern do I want to use in which situation. Now, telling the story right is about these 6 elements to keep in mind while telling the story. Number 1, characters. Kirdar, what need to started with, right? Kitne bhi chote ho, they're quite meaningful. Every story must have characters and every character must have a name. If you think of all the stories I've just told you, they've all been stories where they've been characters and characters have had names. Mark, Sam, Jin, Vikram, they've all had characters and characters have all had names, yes? Now, it's very important to do that. If you have a character, if I just say my friend or my client, the association isn't there. The moment I say Vikram, it becomes real. Now, if you cannot, for confidential reasons, if you cannot use the real name, change the name. That's absolutely fine. I learned that from journalists, and I used to read in the newspapers, then blah, blah, blah. Then Manish, then the victim Manish, bracket, name changed. I used to say, अगर नाम ही change करना है तो just call the person victim only. But just calling the person victim or whatever is not going to associate me, connect me to that person. So it's really important to have characters and characters to have names, number one. Number two, anchor words and phrases, right? Complex and complicated. This is where NLP, the words that you want, that you will address in your key message, bring them into your story, okay? Number three, scenery, make it visual. In your story, 3 minutes, 2 minute story, at least one visual that people can stick, that people can see, whether it's the auto rickshaw or the stage, one visual at least. Specific incidents within the story. So talk about he said, she said kind of a thing. A little bit specific, if you have the time, can really help. Make the tone conversational. Don't make it sound scripted. And here's where I'll contradict myself. You have to script your story, but not sound scripted. And that comes with practice, but it's really important at the beginning to script it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to prepare for your stories. And finally, do plan for your transitions. So from a story, I need to get to the key message. What am I saying to get to my key message? Initially, a couple of times when you do this, it may seem very, very prepared, rehearsed, and that's fine. That's just the natural order of learning how to acquire a new skill. Yeah? So those folks are the 6 things to keep in mind, and we're pretty close to the time to get to a closure. And does it work? Absolutely does work. These are some real, pretty latest reveals from my clients on how it's helped them. The first one that you see is from an AI company based in Melbourne, which has started using storytelling quite a lot for the last 6-7 months, and this is results over the last 5 or 6 months that they've been doing it. The other 2 are different organizations. Now, the last one is for one of our clients in India, one of the largest e-commerce players in India, using storytelling for inspirational leadership. This is the score measured through the entire internal engagement survey of how people are receiving the new way in which leaders are communicating. They didn't even use the word storytelling. They just wanted to get a sense of, are people enjoying the new way in which leaders are communicating? Obviously, what they were doing was storytelling. Whew. So with that, folks, thank you so much for joining in on this session. And let me open up the space to some questions. So I'd love to take some questions that you may have. If you can pop in there.